Hi, and welcome back to Just Ask the Question. I am your host, Brian Karam. With me today, I'm going to pronounce it wrong. I know I will. Bushra Amiwala. Am I
You said
good?
it perfect.
Thank you. Well, I have to practice because everybody always gets my last name wrong. So I try I try to do it right. She is a candidate for Congress in Illinois' ninth district and one of 18 Democrats running and one of the youngest elected officials in the United States. So I welcome you, Bushra, and I'm thank you. I thank you for this conversation because I think it's going to be really helpful as we go forward into the midterms. So as this is just ask the question, I'm going to just ask you the question: what makes you think the Democrats have learned any lesson from 2024? What is that lesson?
The lesson is that Democrats can't just simply be the lesser of two evils, posing as of a threat. Genuinely, like that cannot be the differentiator between us. We have always been the party with moral ground and big and bold ideas. And now suddenly we've gone from that to just being the logic fact spitters, but you can't compete with ethos, which is what the Republican Party leans into, emotions, as all we have is logos and logic to combat that too. So hopefully we go beyond that. And we're also seeing that Democrats are also equally as bought as some Republicans, and there really needs to be.
Wait, you're just seeing that?
I do think it's been an interesting awakening on a large scale. I sometimes have to remind myself what the average American knows versus what someone that pays attention knows. And I will say that the jig is up.
Well, AOC said recently that the Democrats cannot win by just simply being as progressive as hell. That you have to find candidates who can win in the districts, and that runs counter to what many progressives are saying: is to jettison the moderates out of the Democratic Party and be totally progressive. How do you feel it works best?
I don't think it's as simple as we need more progressives or we need less moderates. I think we need people that can talk to the average person and convince them why we care and have lived through the problems that everyday Americans face, have solved them with teams, and have your best interests at hand. I think the disconnect is you have people trying to put on a show or convince that they understand the things that they're talking about or advocating for, such as skyrocketing healthcare, when maybe they've never actually been confronted with that problem. So it's a lack of sincerity I see.
Well, all right, give me an example. I know you just said healthcare, but give me an example, specific example where you think people are being less than honest.
So another example I'll give is that when we talk about something like canceling the student debt, sure, it's an exciting thing to say as a campaign promise, but what does it actually mean to be a part of this generation drowning in student debt post graduation when tuition costs have skyrocketed over 1,000% over the past 20 to 30 years alone? Like to have actually lived that and come with sincerity of what it means that higher education is unaffordable is far different than saying, yeah, let's cancel student debt because it sounds cool to say these days.
Yes, I'd love to have mine canceled. No, I'm just kidding. I'm still paying. No, I'm not. So actually, I think I am. Anyway, but here's the question that comes from that. As we go forward in this election cycle, and now we're locked into it. We're less than a year away from the midterm elections. There is real concern, and this is something I've said many times. We we have two parties in this country. One has no heart, and one has no head. And as one who has covered this for a while, I always find that the Democrats, while having the best intentions, don't often communicate well with the electorate. And let's talk about new generation of leadership. Nancy Pelosi is leaving. Chuck Schumer probably should. There are plenty that Mitch McConnell should have left 20 years ago. He should have never been elected. But all of that aside, what do you think your generation understands and can bring to the table that others don't?
So my generation has grown up doing lockdown drills in school. We have only seen our earth on fire. We have lived through your computer being plugged into the wall, and if you unplug it, it'll suddenly not function anymore, to being the youngest generation to have a smartphone in our hands. We're the most technologically savvy, yet we understand the negative implications if this industry is not regulated. We are also the generation, because you give credit where it's due, whether it's bad or good, that sometimes doesn't read beyond the headlines and can be very emotion and quick to judge oriented, but we also have more information facts and knowledge at our disposal than any other previous generation has. Therefore, this world that we are inheriting, we did not contribute to any of the problems that we're inheriting with it, but we have a laundry list of the solutions if it's our chance to finally break into the mold and demand that we're a part of the system that solves it.
If you've never experienced the problems, how do you have the solutions?
We are experiencing the problems. We just didn't
Well, if you've
create
never
them.
contributed to the problems, how do you understand the solutions?
Because you have the historical knowledge of how we got here. It's a look back that's required to understand what the look forward looks like, and knowing that we are the biggest stakeholder in deciding what that solution looks like. Climate change, I think, is a great example. We see the way oil and gas has had the most negative PR campaign against clean, green energy. Green energy is not just good for the environment, it's the energetically efficient option, and it's good for your wallet. People assume that green energy is for some reason more expensive than traditional oil and gas energy. Again, that's another example of just having that information at your disposal.
So, to do you believe that you should reach out to red voters?
I think it depends. I think it depends. So for me right now, like my district is an 80% blue district. Does it make sense for me to reach out to the 20% of red voters that exist in my district right now? Probably not the most productive thing for me to be doing ahead of a Democratic primary. However, sometimes I do meet people that identify as red voters, and I find that we all care about the exact same things: safe communities, good public schools, and the ability to afford goods, gas, and groceries. The what is the same, but the how of how we're bringing other Americans along for the journey and the principles that we share is what the differentiator comes down to.
So you let's project forward. You've raised, it says, $430,000 in quarter 3. Other candidates' strong fundraising include digital influencer I can't pronounce Kat's name, and FBI official Phil Andrews. So, if you are in fact successful and become the Democratic nominee and run, and you have to talk to Republicans, now you may only have 20% in your area, but you will be in Congress where there are plenty of Republicans.
Yep.
So how do you approach a Republican? How do you, if a Republican comes up to you and says, "Why should I vote for you? Why should I listen to you? You don't care about me." What do you tell them?
So I'd come back to, I think we're really used to, when it comes to negotiating, looking at the distributive issues, meaning the things that we don't have in common, and we end up shrinking the size of the pie. There are so many more integrative issues that can increase the size of the pie that both Democrats and Republicans care about. I'll bring up the healthcare example. If I'm talking to a traditional progressive Democrat and I bring up universal healthcare, all I need to say is it's the right thing to do, right? Healthcare is a human right, and suddenly they're on board. If I'm speaking to someone that's a bit more fiscally conservative, all I have to say to vouch for universal healthcare is that it's the economically viable, fiscally responsible, logical mode for our country to adopt to. So again, the what is the same, the how of the talking points are the only differentiator, and people need to really put in the effort that it takes to make sure you're confident in the policies and solutions that you're championing to be able to meet your audience where they're at.
So, and if they tell you you're an elitist, left-wing liberal, and you don't care about me, what do you say?
I say, I'm not an elitist left-wing Brigwell, but tell me why you think I don't care about you, and what would caring about you look like? I used to work in sales, and the first thing they teach you is ask the other person as many questions as you can before you try to answer. So really, it's unpacking where that comes from. Why do you think we don't care? Well, what does caring for you look like? And truly, I think in a world of polarization, discourse is lost. And I think there are also, I will say, like some conversations, there isn't discourse, there isn't a moral compromise that exists. But for a lot of other topics, there are. And I think there's a reason why we're seeing all of us find ourselves in insulated silos, only being surrounded by people that already agree with us, which is making it more difficult to have those types of conversations.
And your generation, by the way, is probably, I think you have to be nearly 40 to be able to afford a home these days. That you are living at home with parents or renting. People of your generation are putting off getting married, putting off having children because of fiscal necessity as well as other hardships. So, if you're going to be a leader of your generation, what do you tell members of your generation about education, healthcare, and owning a home, which all red, white, blue voters, any side of the aisle, cares about those things the most. So what do you tell them?
I think anyone in this generation would love to be able to own a home. And the fact of the matter is, because we're drowning in whether it be student debt, whether it be any type of interest based loans that people take with the current credit rates that we even have offering, like the macroeconomic climate is so beyond just something like student loans, as an example, too, is that people can't even imagine what it looks like to own a home. You brought up age 40. I have peers who think they will never own their own home in their lifetime. So now, when people are just trying to survive, when you come to them with a pie in the sky idea of what will it take, how can we make sure that you're set up to own a home and to have social security by the time you retire, when the current generation that is expected to reap the benefits of social security that they've paid into are still not confidently able to do so either. It really comes back to the systematic and the way that this current system has been designed to have every single odd stacked against the working class. It's the 1% versus the 99% rest of us. It's not even right versus left anymore. It's bought versus unbought.
It's never been right versus left. I'll give you a little hint. It's always been those who have versus those who have not. It's not a
Yeah.
new. That's not new. But you have your notable opponents, I'm told, are Evanston Mayor Daniel Biss, Illinois State Senator Laura Fine, and union organizer Justin Ford. There are 18 Democrats running for this seat. So, where do you think that you'll be able? How confident are you of being successful, and why?
Very confident. I think it would be tone deaf to run in a race in which you don't see a clear path to victory. It's an irresponsible use of every single person that donates even a penny to your campaign, and it's an irresponsible use of my time and my team's time. That being said, I'm the only candidate. I mean,
I
it's
just want to
true.
tell you that's while true, you would eliminate probably 99% of the people running for office if
I
you
agree.
held them
And
to that standard. But go ahead.
totally. Agreed. And I think I wish that that's the principle that people held themselves towards. Like, genuinely, I do wish it is, because that is just in part one of the right things to do. That being said, I'm the only candidate in this race that has, I'd say, let's measure us by three things. I'll add on a fourth: consistency, who's been consistent on the issues and topics that they're advocating for and championing in this race; credibility, who's been doing this work for over a year in all of these different spaces, not just maybe putting on a show right now in the short term; and relationships, right? Who has the relationships with the people in the community, everyday voters, but also community leaders. The fourth thing would be the lived experience, to know what we are talking about. The last thing I'll add on to is that I'm the only candidate in this race that can activate a voting block beyond just the typical Democratic primary voter, whether that means people that only vote in general elections, or whether that's people that only vote in presidential elections, or whether that's a net new voter. I'm grateful to have a proven track record of someone who's been able to do that from my previous three elections that I've run in.
What's your message to your generation as you look at this, at the generation that everyone agrees should be leaving leadership? What's your message to your generation?
My message to this generation is you can build a foundation as you walk on it. It's something my dad instilled in me growing up. And I find that as a younger generation, we oftentimes get knocked at our experience before anything else. And you get compared to someone who has been in a space for 30, 40 years, whereas you might have 2 to 3 under your belt. That being said, the wealth of knowledge and experience is quantified in different ways now, and getting involved right now is what is actually the moral imperative option, and that responsibility is on our shoulders. We can't be politically apathetic the way that it's designed for us to be.
Well, you talk about something being all right. Two questions arise from that. If you're going to say, hey, don't discount my experience, are you discounting the experience of someone who has more experience than you?
No, that's why I said I wouldn't. Like, how do you compare? You quantify your experience in different ways.
So if their experience is more, you respect it, or you just, if you say, hey, I have a better idea, sit down.
I say, I have a different idea. Why don't you listen?
That's a better, all right. And then the other one, you saying getting involved. Let's talk about that. There are fewer than, on a national level, if you've got a good voter turnout, it's maybe around 60%, right? in 62%. The mayoral race in New York was much higher. But here we are staring at, for national elections, a very low voter turnout. I know we say that over 50% is a good voter turnout, but that only means that a super minority of people will end up electing you. I'm not going to name names, Donald Trump, but there are plenty of people who only get elected by super minorities, Donald Trump, who, because they're super minorities, Donald Trump, go out and vote. So the question remains, the biggest question I always have of any candidate is, what exactly do you think should be done to get voters to turn out for an election?
First, the responsibility is on the candidate to inspire a voter to come out and vote. Yes, as someone who comes from the realm of civic engagement, voting is our responsibility as a citizen and contributor of this country, and we should vote regardless. But if I'm not inspired by a candidate to vote for, it suddenly feels like a chore as opposed to an exciting thing I'm able to do once or twice a year. The second piece of that is anything that we as a country can do to make voting as easy and as accessible as possible. That means expanding early voting hours from beyond just a 5 p.m. cutoff for the first 2 weeks of early voting. Who does that prevent? That prevents working people far and beyond. Second thing would be the time to order a mail-in ballot happens almost 3 months ahead of a primary election, when we know that the average voter doesn't even know there's an election happening until 6 weeks before election time, far after mail-in ballot cutoffs have already surpassed. The third thing is Illinois now has an automatic voter registration option for people that are 16 when they're going to get their ID for the first time if they check a box. I think that's a great example that every other state in this country can replicate to make it, again, as easy as possible to engage in the electoral process. Because if you're inspired, you'll jump through every single hoop you can. But if you're kind of doing it as a chore and as your responsibility as a person of the society, then we need to make sure we remove and eliminate every barrier possible to make it as easy as possible to vote.
I don't think you rely on inspiration. There are very few inspired voters. It is a chore. It is considered a chore, but it is your civic responsibility. So those are all fine ideas, but pragmatically, what do you, on the ground, pragmatically, what do you think needs to be done? And I can give you a few examples, but I mean, I'd love to hear yours.
I do think the couple of things that I mentioned to your point are a bit more institutional, right? Things like expanding early voting hours, etc. I think you might not think this is a pragmatic idea, but something we did for my very first election was we had buses, school buses taking people after Friday prayer service
I
to an
think that's
early
very
voting site.
pragmatic, and that's exactly what I was looking for. That's the answer I
Yeah.
wanted to hear,
Yeah.
because there are elderly voters who can't get out. There are families, there are husbands and wives at work and can't. Some of them only have one car. Some of them have no car. And you're looking at the 2026 midterm elections with the very real potential of voter suppression, seeing ICE and and the National Guard on the streets, scaring people away from voting. So how are you going to deal with that? Busing is one. Are there others?
Yeah, I think the general bus can represent just making it ease of transportation. The second piece is, so we as direct candidates can't facilitate this, but civic volunteers can, and it's making sure that people know when the mail-in ballot request timeline is. So it's having volunteers go into senior living facilities or retirement homes and guiding through that process of what it looks like to order and request a mail-in ballot. Again, that happens a month from now, but our election isn't until 4 months from now, right now. Like, again, like, who knows that there is an election happening? Even that information and knowledge gathering can help eliminate that. Something that I used to work at Google prior to running for this seat full time, and Google offered paid leave to go vote. And I think that's something that a lot of different, not just private companies, but public institutions can offer, that I think even something like a teachers union group can maybe negotiate into their contract. We see a lot of schools being polling places, so election day is off for a lot of schools as well. So myriad of different ways to make it as easy as possible for working class to participate in the civic process.
The other question that comes to mind, there are two, and I won't beat around the bush. You're a woman of color with a name that many people will not be able to pronounce. And they will be scared of your name, your religion, and the fact that you're female.
Mhm.
And that's a fact. You're going to have to deal with
Mhm.
that. If you have the nomination, you're going to have to deal with that in Congress. You will have to deal with that among the electorate. How do you deal with that?
Thankfully, in Illinois' ninth congressional district, it's one of the most progressive districts in the state. And I have to
I'm
remind
not talking
myself
about
that
your progressive district. I'm talking about the Republicans you're going to have to talk to.
I agree. And I think it always comes back to who votes you into office because those Republicans will try to otherize me when I'm the only person in this community and in this race that's been born and raised in the district I'm hoping to represent. And that ends up being noise. It ends up being a distraction. It ends up being a deflection method to prevent the productive work that I can do. And it's a matter of shunning that and engaging when it's not productive and focusing on one, the entity that continues to vote me into office, because truly those are the main stakeholders I'm responsible to answer to. And two, it's the best way to filter out the bots and the noise that exist. I've already been facing this for 9 years now, being in this space. From a candidate to every day, I could post the same thing my other candidate counterparts that are either white or white passing do, and I get told to go back to my country. When, again, I've been a product of this community.
You were born here, raised here. You're so I get it. If ICE picked you up, where would they deport you to? Skokie? I mean, I don't, I understand the situation. Believe me, I understand it on a personal level. I understand it, but the question I have is not so much the voters, but to be an effective legislator, you're going to have to deal with people that are racist. You're going to have to, how do you deal with the Laura Loomers of the world? How do you deal with people who hate you before they even meet you?
I've learned over the years that not responding is a response. It really is. And not engaging is a really powerful tool to reclaim your energy, to reclaim your time. And I'm lucky that I'm not the first in this space. I see reps like Rep Rashida Tlaib, Rep Ilhan Omar, and I see the way they've, I mean, even Rep Ayanna Presley, right? Like it's beyond just a faith piece. It's being just a woman of color, gracefully engaging and existing in this world. And I have a playbook that I can learn from and follow. So I'm not having to reinvent the wheel on my own either.
Are you curious about why some people hate you without knowing you?
No, I already know why. I mean,
Why?
we see propaganda. We see the way that the media has otherized Muslims. I mean, let's be real. We make up of 25% of the global population, but we're 1.1% of the US population. And it stems from unfamiliarity coupled with where people get their information from. And I do know that just me simply being and existing will continue to be a counter example along with everyone that's come before me and after me to refute against that.
Well, how do you deal with someone coming up to you? You're Muslim. You're a terrorist. You're Muslim. You're against God. You're Muslim. We're a Christian nationalist nation. How do you deal with that?
Sometimes again it's not my productive time or effort to be the singular force that rewrites generations of racism that's ingrained into one's fabric of how they view this world. Truly, like I will not be the tipping point that suddenly brings it back because that's decades of someone's mind and way of thinking and viewing the world that needs to be unlearned and ungrained. And I think that release of responsibility means that I focus on what's in my control. I can control my intention to make a positive difference in this community and in this world and my effort. And it's to show up with 110% every single day. Beyond that, I don't think it's my responsibility to do or change that.
If someone's saying all Muslims are terrorists, you don't you don't feel the need to respond to that?
I don't think my clapback tweet will be the reason why they stop thinking
Oh,
that.
well, I'm not talking about tweeting. That's not communication. That's just simply people hiding behind the bushes and throwing shit at you. I cannot stand that. But I mean, if you were to engage with a voter, how would you engage with one who sat down with you and said, "Look, I'd be interested in voting for you, but you're Muslim and you're a terrorist." What would
So
you
that's
tell?
a so that's a fully different now conversation that we're having. This is someone who had the willingness to sit down with me and look me in the eye and acknowledge having a learning mindset. That is incredibly different from someone that is spewing hate online. To me, that's a very easy way to unlearn, and that's already starting the process of unlearning, whether it be microaggressions or preconceived notions or an unconscious bias that one hands. And as someone that's been doing interfaith work since I was a high school student, I can really put on a full Abrahamic faith history lesson if I need to. And I feel confident and equipped to do that. And it's meeting people where they're at in that specific conversation.
I'd quote the Quran to them that the Lord went out and taught you to love. I would quote the Quran. I would quote the Bible. The thing I love, thing that drives me nuts is that the Quran venerates both Jesus and Moses, and I see a natural progression between the three major religions of this country, and I find it infuriating that people don't recognize that. But that's just me. And when I bring it up, I'm accused of being a Muslim communist. And so I don't even know how to react to that. But I appreciate it. Listen, I want you to give your 2 minute. All right, so you're going to meet a voter, not necessarily someone who wants to vote for you. You've got 2 minutes to convince them. Give me your 2 minute speech. Give me your best 2 minutes.
I'll say hi. My name is Bushra Amiwala. It's great to meet and see you. I am a daughter of two Pakistani immigrants who built their life in Illinois 9, brick by brick. My dad's a small business owner. My mom's a teacher. Skokie schools literally changed my life. So to be elected to represent this Board of Education for the past 7 years has been an honor of a lifetime. Now that Congresswoman Schakowsky's announced retirement, I'm excited to be running to represent you and your interests at hand. I will hopefully advocate for healthcare, education, and supporting immigration with a clear path to citizenship. If there's anything that I did not bring up in my 2 minutes, I want to hear from you to make sure you're adequately represented, because I can talk about what I think is interesting for hours at a time, but I want to hear about what you think is interesting. And I bring experience from the public, private, and government sector. And what I've learned in those three spaces is how to manage budget, problems, and people, which makes me the best equipped candidate to represent you in Washington.
Yeah, it's pretty good 2 minutes. I'll close with this: the question that has to be asked, and I hate to ask it, but I have to ask it.
Okay.
Mamdani is elected in New York. The Republicans in Congress, the Laura Loomers of the world, the President of the United States calls Muslims, all Muslims, terrorists, calls you anti-God, and says that you're not American. What is, and I just want a gut reaction. I'm not a politician, but a personal reaction. How does that affect you? And what do you tell someone who says that? Let's start with the communist part first. You're a Democrat, and so I'm not going to go, but you are a Democrat, and that's not communism and it's not socialism. But go ahead. After that part, how do you react to it?
I mean, Brian, on a personal level, seeing the Islamophobic hate that was weaponized against Mamdani literally does pain and elicit fear to my core, because I know I'm next. I 100% know I'm next. And I also know that that's such a cheap shot because they had nothing else on him. And to me, it reminds myself that I need to do exactly what Mamdani did, which is to build my own offensive narrative first before I'm even equipped to go defense. Because what's great is Mamdani was the political darling of our world.
Not politics. I'm talking personal. I mean, I want to know how personally, what do you want to say to someone who says, "Look, man, you're against everything this country stands for." And Bushra, I'm sorry, you were born and raised here. You're an American through and through. So I want to know on a personal level, because it affects me personally. I have cousins who are Muslim. I have cousins who are Jewish. I have cousins who are Catholic. And every time I hear this, it pisses me off to the core. So, I mean, I want just that. How does that affect you? And what do you say?
I think in part the reason it's a little difficult for me to give you a gut reaction is because I've almost been desensitized to this. I first ran for
That's
public
scary
office.
of itself.
And I think it's a defense mechanism, because I first ran for public office 3 months after Trump was inaugurated as our president, where his only platform was Islamophobia and xenophobia at the time. And his first executive order was the Muslim ban. And truly, when it comes back to when I talk about a productive use of energy, there's a reason why there's a slight barricade that I have built up where it doesn't elicit a immediate gut reaction, because that is what they want. That is actually what they want,
Well,
because imagine the piece by piece that brings and tears you down as well.
what they want is they want you to get angry and pissed off. They can control that. I understand that. But on a personal level, I mean, it affects me personally. It makes me angry. It makes me want to explain to people. It doesn't make me want to get up and thump anybody. I'm beyond that. I'm not going to go there. But on a personal level, doesn't it disappoint you in some? I mean, it seems like we have a country that is uh, diving steeply into Christian nationalism when this country was never founded on that. We have a country that is diving into racism. We thought we had defeated that. And we have a country that seems to shun education and civics. And we had fought a revolutionary war for that. See, I find what you're doing to be the very essence of what the United States is all about. And to even defend what you're doing pisses me off, because on a very, very personal level, it's against everything I ever stand for. I want to know if that hurts you too, if that's where you come from. I know how you're going to battle it. I understand how you battle it politically. But aren't you involved on a personal level because of this very reason? Don't you want to be involved in the public domain because of this very reason?
100%. I think that's why I say I know that I will be the counter example, meaning that any angry reaction that I give will be attributed to my age, my gender, my religion. And that is why I, even in a conversation like this, can't even get myself to elicit the true response that is deep to my core of anger and of fear.
This
because
is a
those
safe
are cheap
space,
emotions.
baby. Go for it.
But
Safe
it's in
space.
spite of that. Like it's actually a testament to how long I've been navigating in this case, because I know that every reaction will not be used against me, but every single person that even just looks like me, right? Like we know even after 9/11, the most demographic that was targeted were Sikh Americans, right? They weren't even Muslim. So all that to say, like I 100% feel it. I feel it and I see it, and I feel personally responsible that every single action or activity or word that comes out of my mouth will somehow be used to generalize, and someone of my faith will be held responsible for that. And that means I carry that burden and responsibility on my shoulders, whether it's unknowingly or knowingly, every day or not.
And I thank you for that personal response. I think that moves voters more than anything. But what do I know? I'm just an old fart. Listen, I want to thank you, Bushra, for joining us. Where can we get for voters who want to help out? How do they reach out to you?
Yes, my website is bushraforcongress.com, Bushra for Congress.com. I'm on Bushra, Amiwala on all socials. I respond to all my Instagram DMs except for the mean ones.
I respond to those. So those are the ones I respond to first. I get a kick out of them. So anyway, I want to thank you for joining us. The name of the show is Just Ask the Question. I'm your host, Brian Karaman. We'll catch you next time.